And I threw out, a couple popular tweets, finally getting around to them, as I said. Just been a lot going on here. So I threw out there, Lagway is a given, because he would have just dominated the comments, of course. So, which
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Which Florida player did you enjoy watching the most this past season, and why? And will two players mention the most, one from each side of the ball? So let's go offense, running back Jaden Baugh. He was the player mentioned the most. Performance, impact, of course. He earned freshman All-SEC honors this past season. Had a huge impact. Impressive season, 673 yards on 133 carries, 5-yard average per carry, 7 touchdowns. Had those standout performances against Kentucky and LSU. Of course, against Kentucky, 5 touchdowns there against the Wildcats. And in that LSU matchup, of course, he sealed a victory with that explosive 55-yard touchdown run. And Will, maybe the biggest thing, and this was brought up a good bit too, filling the void left by Trevor Etienne. We wondered how Florida would replace Trevor Etienne. Jaden Baugh did admirably in his first season here. And, of course, we'll get into some comments here, just some favorable comparisons to some former Gators there at the running back spot as well. And it's just, there's 5 touchdowns against Kentucky. He could dominate games with there, dominate moments like he did against LSU. It's just, awesome to see, excited to see what a year 2 with him gets. And Gator Steve-O, so this is why I want to share. Everybody had some good comments. Go share a little bit of those. Ball showed, Gator Steve-O said on Twitter, that there was 0 drop-off for us at running back, and that the position is actually brighter down the road from losing Etienne to outperforming him. Preston Walsh says Jaden Baugh, he finishes runs with authority, can also go to distance for 6. Florida Gators #1 sports fan says Baugh, he got tossed in the spotlight and delivered, got a lot of playing time, certainly made the most of it, looked like he was supposed to be out there. And then Real Deal C. Neal interacted a good bit on their own Twitter. Says, I think I read those wrong, but anyway, you get the gist of the. I read them out of order, but you get the gist of. Hey, there was a lot of excitement there for Jaden Baugh, what he was able to do. There's freshman accolades, dynamic player at the running back spot. Now Montrell Johnson, of course, the departuring. He's looking like he's going to be the guy now at the running back spot, and an expanded role coming up for him, of course. But let's not forget Jacoby Jackson, pair it with him as well. And while he didn't have the explosive runs that Ball had, still major impact there for Jacoby Jackson. Got to bring up a little bit. Minor injury. Ball currently recovering from a minor offseason surgery. Had that arthroscopic procedure, that minor cartilage damage in his meniscus. Kind of very similar to what Montrell Johnson had right before the season. Remember, he was back. He got hurt in fall camp, was back for game 1 versus Miami. So minor procedure here for Ball. Expected to be ready for spring camp. So full recovery. Should be on the field for spring. No long-term concerns there. Jaden Baugh was by far and away, Will, the most excited player that the Gator Nation was seeing on the field in 2024. Besides DJ Lagway.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, I thought Ball was great. I mean, look at his PFF ranking; it's 81.1 overall. From a pass block ranking, he was 68, which is better than Etienne's bet if you add his last 2 years together. I think in terms of pass protection. But Jacoby Jackson was real close. He was right behind, 77.9 overall. He was actually really good pass blocking, and he was a much better threat through the air, caught more passes and was a better threat through the air as well. So the 1-2 punch of Jackson and Baugh were really exciting for Florida to see, especially since Montrell Johnson went down early with an injury and wasn't really himself even when he came back. And, we learned a lot that when he did come back, he didn't immediately slot right back into that starter spot, right? Like he came back and they were like, we're gonna work you back in slowly there, Chief, because we got this guy over here who's pretty good. The 5 touchdowns against Kentucky were a little bit overrated from the standpoint of DJ Lagway kept getting him down to the 1 with Badger, and then they didn't let him punch it in. But still, how often have we seen Florida struggle in the red zone from the 1-yard line, not be able to punch the ball in? So, having a guy who has great ball security, I can't remember him putting the ball on the ground. Somebody who has Jackson put it on the ground against Texas. It really kind of killed that game. But I don't remember Baugh putting the ball on the ground. So you figure a true freshman coming in, you're making him run hard between the tackles, get those tough yards down in the red zone. He was able to do it without putting the ball on the ground. And then between both him and Jackson, both being good at pass blocking, which again, if you think about what Florida needs, they need somebody to be able to make sure Lagway doesn't end up on the ground. So there were multiple times where I can remember, a blitzing linebacker coming, the running back gets in the way enough that allows the ball to get off for Lagway. So those are the things that you don't necessarily always see when you're watching Lagway do something otherworldly, but when the running back can step up and do that, that's obviously a great thing. And then, again, to me, it's still the run against LSU, right? It's put the game away when there's an opportunity. Like Florida needed to run the ball to run up the clock, and between Lagway hitting the check down to Hansen for a first down, and then Baugh hitting the home run to take it all the way in for the touchdown. Those will sort of be some enduring images. And I was there with Max, so part of it's just me being there and it being live. But that was also when Florida changed the season, right? I mean,
and he had the very next game had that nice catch and run pass against Ole Miss.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I think anytime a true freshman is contributing, you need to pay attention. But when they're essentially one of your best offensive players, then it's like, okay, what does the future hold? Now, we have seen in the past, obviously, with ETN leaving and then Montrell Johnson sort of, like, Johnson never took a next step, right? He was who he was for the time that he was at Florida, which was a very good back, but didn't take the next step. That'll be my question for these two guys is there a next step? Does the explosive run against LSU turn into 4, 5, 6 explosive runs next year, especially with Florida's continuity on the offensive line? And if Baugh can do what he did and then add a few more explosives, well, now all of a sudden you're talking about a guy who's threatening to get 1,000 yards. And, that's not something that happens at Florida every day, certainly. So hopefully he gets that opportunity next year.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to that comment from Gator Steve-O since I got out of order there. Baugh was just awesome to watch. Runs like Dameon Pierce and gets the carries in our offense. Excited to see what 4 years will produce. So, yeah, I mean, I remember going back and the hype started in the spring game, Will, for Jaden Baugh. And you always wonder, is it just a spring game star or is it just somebody who will just go away? Will there be a spring game star, just go away? You never hear from him during the regular season. That wasn't the case with Baugh. He kept up, and as Carolina Fishing puts in here, don't forget about Webb's Trayon Webb return as well. So Florida pretty deep at running back, as we know. But a good little comparison to the Dameon Pierce. I remember a lot of people throwing that out when they were watching him in the spring game of just the physicality and the way he can make guys miss was something that really stands out in comparison to one Dameon Pierce. So let's go to the other side here.
Hold on. Hopefully they give him more than 5 carries a game next year. Sorry, could resist.
Yes. The other player, maybe it should have. I guess it did surprise me a little bit just how much he was mentioned. And that was nickel star Aaron Gates. John Seibel said on the post, Gates all over the place, nose for the ball, showed he's legit. And we discussed Gates some because of Florida and what they are pursuing in the transfer portal, like we mentioned, of some versatile defensive backs that could fit in the nickel role, the safety role. So we've discussed Gates a bit, but now it's mainly because of the injury. So he sustained that versus Ole Miss in the second play of the game. Didn't return, of course, missing the FSU game and the bowl game. Made 5 starts and 10 appearances, 27 tackles, 4 tackles for loss for Gates, 3 pass breakups, 2 fumble recoveries, an interception, and a quarterback hurry. And we all saw it. Napier had to say after the injury that Aaron has been one of our best players the last probably 5 or 6 weeks of the season. Still a young player, but extremely talented. And that was right after the Ole Miss game. So it was a knee injury. We all hope he can bounce back from, because he was, coming along pretty good, playing physical, coming down, making tackles. In his last 4 games, he had at least 4 tackles in the game, 4 against Kentucky and Georgia, 8 against Texas, and 4 against LSU. So against Georgia, had on back-to-back plays. He had a tackle for loss and a play later. Had an interception with a 30-yard return. Against LSU, had a stop on a 3rd and 2, holding a pass to 0 yards and forcing a punt, which eventually led to a Gators touchdown. So, of course, at the nickel spots, Gates wasn't by himself. You have Sharif Denson. He played well there too, and was able to take over. Not much of a drop-off late in the season. Hopefully, Gates bounces back fast, continues to give Florida options at the spot there, Will. But a player that really caught the attention of Gator Nation because it was a lot of people pointed it out right there on X. B. Tambling said Aaron Gates, as others have mentioned, haven't seen the defensive back hit like that and be all over the field in ages, it feels like. Coach Jay Salas said there were a few, but I really enjoyed watching the duo of Denson and Gates. Both made plays. Both were fantastic against the run. Both played strong coverage. Both really locked down one of the toughest positions on the field. And Joshua Moore, well, I'll save that one in just a second, but that was all the lauding of the defensive player that was mentioned the most, one Aaron Gates.
And Gates is interesting. He's gonna be a polarizing figure, especially as he comes back off the injury. When I look at the advanced stats, they're not very good.
Right.
And it's not just sort of like the first 3 games of the year and then he picked it up. His advanced stats look really good against Georgia, and then other than that, they're sort of they're kind of pedestrian. The EPA per play allowed for Florida, it is better though when he's on the field versus when he's off. And I think this is almost like, in many ways, it's like the Colts when they used to have Bob Sanders, going back years, right? In the Peyton Manning years, but they used to have Bob Sanders. He could only stay healthy like 3 games a year. But they got him healthy in the playoffs 1 year, and that's the year the Colts won the Super Bowl, because Sanders, when he was on the field, just everything felt different. And so the aggressiveness that Gates brings, sort of the attitude, like, and you didn't see. I remember towards the end of the year, it was after Gates had gone down. There were a couple of runs to the outside where Triquez Bridges just took on a running back and just mauled him and took him down on the ground. And I go, no one did that for the Florida defense until Aaron Gates did it a couple of times. It was almost like he was like, I might screw up the play, but I am going to go balls to the wall 100% every single play. And I think that's what you're seeing in some of the PFF ratings. I think it's that there are times that he's out of position. There are times where he's not able to make the tackle, but there's never a time where he's not going 100% and bringing an attitude that then permeates its way through the rest of the team. And that's an important part of a guy who's going to be in run support as a nickel corner and essentially acting as sort of like another safety out there at times. And so given that Florida has struggled at the safety position specifically, having somebody who can go up there and shore up run support. Look,
we saw it as the season went on. Like, the whole secondary was, like you said, Denson. We saw Castell did it towards later in the season as well. But yeah, I like your point of, taking on the Gates personality.
Look, the on-off numbers don't lie. The EPA per play, so EPA, the more negative it is, the better, is negative 0.11 when he's on. It's negative 0.02 when he's off. So the defense was, wasn't terrible when he was off, but it was really, really good when he was on. And so sort of look at that and go, okay, well, there's got to be something to this that there's a difference just when he's on the field. Now, obviously, his time on the field also started to coincide with some of the defensive linemen stepping up. But also, and I think this is a big part of it, is if you think about what happened as the season went along, Florida really started playing a lot more coverage. Well, how can you do that? The only way you can do that is if you've got corners, specifically that slot corner, who's going to come up and run support and really contribute, really fill the gaps and make sure that nothing turns into something big heading at those safeties. Because our safeties have not been gifted enough in recent years to come up and get a running back or a wide receiver on a screen in space when the guy's got a running start. Right? Like, you got to get him before he gets the running start. So, the big hits from Gates are the things that I think everybody remembers. There was the reverse, I think maybe against Tennessee, or maybe it was Georgia, but I remember him staying home on a reverse. I was like, that never happens. Like, when somebody on the defense stay behind. But I think more than anything, a lot of the things that I think of with him are where he went hard at a wide receiver who was getting a screen and maybe didn't make the tackle, but slowed him up to where the rest of the pursuit could get him, and it's like a 1 or a 2-yard gain, rather than what would have happened in the past, which is the defensive back would have taken on the blocker and sort of like funneled him to the outside, but it wouldn't have slowed him down. And so now you've got a running wide receiver coming at one of your safeties, and Florida hasn't been able to make that tackle in years. So him coming back and coming back strong, obviously, will be a big part of Florida's defense, but that's also why I'm saying DB, 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 DB in the transfer portal, because ACL injuries are not 6-month recoveries. They're just not. And so you're probably talking about a guy who maybe is ready at the end of fall camp to go. But is he going to be 100%? Is he still going to be that motor? Is it still going to be like have that influence on the defense? And, you know, honestly, if Lagway can kind of carry him for 5 or 6 weeks, I'll welcome Bob Sanders back for the second half of the year. let's plug him in there and go for the playoff, man.
There you go. Harrison Sanchez with a good point. How quickly we get Gates and Lions back will be huge, because remember, Lions went down preseason fall camp, and it was kind of mentioned right there along with Cam Jackson to be a 1A, 1B at that spot. And he goes down. So if Gators can get the guys back quickly, you know, if we talked about the portal and maybe filling in those 2 positions of need, it certainly looks like Florida has really honed in on maybe Gates taking some time to come back and getting some depth and some impact at that star safety spot. Keeping it going here, Joshua Moore, he brought up an interesting player. I didn't want to overlook this. There was a lot of Tyreek Sapp. There was a lot of Caleb Banks. There was a lot of Triquez Bridges. A lot of the DK and Badger on the offensive side, but the 2 guys mentioned here were, you know, taken away with the comments there. But Joshua Moore brought up an interesting one. He says Najee Harris, and I thought okay, I like that. I wanted to point that one out because he said learning wide zone was always going to take some time, and while it helps playing next to a future NFL center, Harris' ability to punch on the double team, climb to the next level, make tough reach blocks, and most importantly, finish violently is, to me, a thing of beauty. So I had to point that out. He goes in depth. Looks like there's maybe an offensive line background there from Joshua. So certainly a player that's not going to get a whole lot of love when you do little comments like this on X. Certainly showing one right there.
Sounds like Joshua might have a future breaking down film for reading reactions is what it sounds like. I got to be honest, man. Nobody pointed out your boy. Nobody enjoyed seeing Pup play all year long.
Q Lee maybe in the comments here on YouTube. I can't wait to get Pup back. So maybe maybe Q.
Certainly people who know Gator Dave need to know they're getting on the podcast if they talk about Pup. I mean, that's the way to go, man.
That's true. He was mentioned a few times in there, but of course, certainly was one of my favorites. I hated that he went down with that injury, but hey, look, I mean, he's won more since he missed kind of that last stretch of Florida winning a whole bunch of games. Add him into that mix of Lions and Gates and maybe those guys on the field together, fully healthy, ready to go for Florida near the beginning of the season.